Hello, Kennedale. Jeff Nevarez, Kennedale News, and we're here with another coffee chat. We're back, and we're going to do this again this year. I'm looking forward to talking to everybody. But first up, we have place two for the city council position. We have Bryant Griffith and James Connor. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
James, I didn't hear you. Maybe your mic cut out for a second. How are
Yeah,
you
good.
doing?
I'm
There you
well.
go. Thank you. All right. Just so everybody understands the format at home, each candidate has sent me three questions, and each candidate has read each other's three questions. I've added a seventh. We all know what the questions are. Everybody's had time to prepare, and we've agreed to a format of which order and et cetera beforehand. And we're just going to jump right into this. We'll start with some intros. Griff, why don't you start us off and introduce everybody about who you are and why you're running?
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody mostly knows me at this point, or should. My name is Bryant Griffith. I'm a small business owner. We have a small family. We have three kids, 10, 5, and 4. My wife and I landed in Kennedale in 2021. And as far as what drives us to serve, a lot of that's faith-based. It's just kind of where I feel called. So I'm a 10-year Marine Corps veteran. Got out of the service in 2018 when I was medically retired. And one of the biggest questions for me and my family at the time was, um, what what can I do that will kind of fill that space for me? I was very passionate about my service. I'm very passionate about serving my community, my neighbors, and that's kind of what drives me forward, and what led me to apply to run for place two.
James?
Well, mostly everyone knows me. I'm a former city council member myself, from 21 to 23. I've been in Kennedale for about, I'd say since 2016. However, my family has been based here since the 70s, actually. So they've been, I've known Kennedale for quite some time, uh, and its problems and its highs, ups and downs and lows. Um, I'm running because I still want to make a difference in our community, and I'm still here for the citizens. I haven't left. I'm still looking to make sure that transparency and communication are open, and want to move the city forward.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to a great conversation. You both have done this before with me, so I know it's going to be electrifying. First question is James to Griff. Griff, transparency and accountability have been the recurring concerns in Kennedale. Can you give a specific example of how you have demonstrated or would demonstrate accountability in office and what concrete steps you would take to ensure city leadership is held to the same standard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great question. Thanks for that, James. I think that there have been questions in the past. I'd like to lead off with the fact that I think that so far as a perceived lacking in that department for us, I've seen a great deal of forward progress. Um, and I'm very proud to say that I've been a part of that, and that many people consider me to be what they would call a an accountability partner. So with that, accountability it starts with ownership, and I think I've demonstrated that pretty consistently. Um, and one clear example of that in execution of your roles and responsibilities as a councilman, um, is when things come to council for consideration, like in this example, our trash rate increase that was discussed. I was one of the only sitting council members to vote against it. And that wasn't because the increase wasn't necessary as much as it was that the justification to increase that rate, it didn't meet the standard our residents deserve. And the point there really is that when it was presented to us, the cost inflation goes up, businesses have to increase their costs. That's why the contracts are written that way. They can come in and propose incremental increases over time, which is a responsible thing to do. In this particular case, when this came to council and we reviewed it, the presenter had also mentioned that they did receive an increase the prior year, but they failed to implement it. And so my big question was, okay, we're not actually giving our citizens, at the time, I think it was a 4% increase. They were going to see a 9% increase on their bill overnight. To me, that was where accountability needs to be asserted, right? Looking at it and then digging into it a little bit more, asking hard questions. Um, and that's what accountability is all about. It's about being able to ask the hard questions, even when it's not popular. But that's our responsibility. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have the hard conversations, discuss things, bring them to light, have those conversations, and then try to find the most equitable way forward, to protect the citizens from large increases in rates and things of that nature. So moving forward, I would focus on three things: just uh, clear, accessible financial transparency. And again, some of these things are things that we've already started to do, and people have seen. They can go to the city website now, where in years past we didn't have all that information readily available. It's there now. Documented decision making with measurable outcomes, continued accessibility, and public engagement. And then there's just several other examples. There was this big push when TGAA came in, wanted to present a contract to help us with accountability and transparency. There's a due diligence the council has to do some research. There's free programs that we don't have to pay for. When one prime example of that is the Transparency Stars program in Tarrant County. Everyone can participate in that for free at no cost. Those are the things that the council should be exploring, where the resources are, making sure that information is available to the public, and then discussing that as a decision point. And then, Jeff, you can attest to this with the accountability partner comment I had made, that whether we see eye to eye or disagree on things, I've always been a person that can ask the hard questions and present things that might seem unfavorable or hard to address. And I did that the entire time I served in 23 to 24. And many of my co-counsel had experienced that challenge with me. My willingness to be able to ask the hard questions, and then also when those hard questions are presented to myself, presenting myself to the public, being completely open and transparent, even when I'm not required to, instead of sidestepping things or deferring to legal counsel, just standing in the light and being completely open and transparent. And I would say that pretty much epitomizes my belief in accountability and transparency, and what our responsibility is as counsel to the people.
James?
Well, accountability isn't a slogan for me. It's something I've already practiced and I've done throughout a long time now. So during my time serving on council in Kennedale, I've made it a point to keep residents informed with consistent weekly updates that I did through Facebook and my own Facebook platform. Especially when it came to new developments, infrastructure projects, and decisions coming out of City Hall. People shouldn't have to chase information or rely on rumors to understand what's happening in their own city. And I remember that trash rate that Griff was talking about. They were coming back with a 4% increase, and it was going to go back to 9. I was actually part of that last increase, where they wanted to come in and do 10%. We said no many times. I think it was once. We tabled it, and they came back. We negotiated. We got it down to 5. They failed that increase. So that was actually starting on
Yeah,
my
that's what
count.
happened.
That's what happened. And we said no to 10. They went down to 5. And then they came back a year later and like, oh, we want 4. And now it's basically, they got their 10 eventually, which is why we went to a new trash company. I'm assuming.
Exactly. You're right.
But I like to take that a step further in what I've done in the past by institutionalizing transparency. Basically, what that means what that looks like for me is that requiring public reporting on, major projects, including timelines, costs, and whether those commitments are actually being met. And that's what we want to start doing. And if council passes something that isn't, executed, or, whether it's an ordinance or a tax measure or a project directive, or it needs to come back to council before it can be publicly with an explanation and a corrective plan. That's what transparency looks like. That's what accountability looks like. We're making these people that come into our city and build, or whether it be a developer or whatever, whether it be, roads being redone. We're going to start making them accountable for, what they're doing. Um, Accountability also means documentation. Every agreement, every expectation, and every deliverable should be clearly defined and accessible to the public. When expectations are clear, it becomes much harder for anyone, staff, leadership, outside partners, to avoid that responsibility. And that's what I feel that, transparency and accountability mean. As for me, I've been an open book. I've always been an open book. All you have to do is ask. I'll tell you the information, unless, of course, it's an executive session, and then I can just give you a Cliff Notes version of what the discussion was about without really giving anything away. Hey, this is what was discussed. I can't tell you the outcome. I'm sorry. Um, Accountability, hold me accountable. I've been held accountable before. I sat on that council. You sat on that council. Griffith sat on that council. People think it's all, peachy king and, fun dandelions walking through, blue bonnets in the spring. It's really not. But, I'm up for the challenge again.
James, I'm glad you said it that way too. Like for me, transparency is a buzzword because, we do have laws that guide us on what should be very public, and there's ways for citizens that are benefit the citizen side of it, not necessarily the government side, to get that information as well beyond executive session stuff, as you said. And then I think the city of Kennedale does a great job, especially in the last 6 years now, is making sure they try to get as much information that they can out to the public, whether it's the website, the newsletter, or just being available for questions. And I know you guys are available just like I am when it comes to the public. I just think people they expect that knock on the door and to ask permission of what to do. And that's just not how our government works. All three of us put in time beyond an average citizen to understand these things, to work on these things. And so when it's time to bring it to the citizens for a decision, we hear both sides. And some people just think it's their side's the only one, and we must do that or they're going to vote us out, kind of thing. Excuse me. But there's two sides that we have to hear from, and then it's left to us to make that ultimate decision, and that's what a representative democracy does. So great points there, gentlemen. This next question is for you, James from Griff. The question is Kennedale's long-term tax stability and economic strength depend in part on effective regional collaboration and the ability to attract outside investment and opportunity? Great question. Go ahead.
That is actually a great question. And Canada's future depends on how well, we do work beyond our borders. Regional partnerships are critical for infrastructure, finding opportunities, and economic development. I mean, look, we are landlocked between three big cities: Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield.
And Burleson,
And
really.
Burleson
Yep.
starting to grow up as well.
Yep.
So there's four actually.
Yep.
So of course, yes, our regional partner, and we don't just partner with just those. We partner with North Richland Hills. We partner with Grapevine. We partner with a lot of different regional areas and regional cities. And I've already operated in that environment. On council, we've already done that, and understanding how to navigate those relationships, whether it's working with Tarrant County on the major road projects that we've done, that we started on my council, that you are now finishing on yours. Not finishing, but picking up the pieces going forward. And coordinating with neighboring cities and ensuring that Kennedale has a seat at the table in regional planning discussions, because we might be only 6.65 square miles of land, but and I don't want to say we hold a lot of sway, but there are three major highways that run through us. We have 20, we have Business 287, and we have regular 287. Those three highways by themselves, that should be bringing economic development here, and it's really not. And with 20 being redone, and some of 287 being redone, that's just going to open our doors even more. So those relationships matter because they're going to bring outside investment into our city, whether it's transportation funding or shared resources or economic opportunities. The goal is to leverage those regional collaborations, so Canada isn't carrying the full burden alone, and our taxpayers aren't taking for granted, and our city will grow, and that's what that's what we've got to look into. Honestly, that's what we have to look forward to. That's what we have. I mean, we're doing it now. We've done it in the past, and I've done it in the past, and like I said, it's something that, I mean, just take a look at our water contract, which I'm sure we'll get into later. We partner with Arlington. Oh yeah, I've got an entire section already on
I
that.
bet y'all did. I'm glad I sent
Um,
that over.
yeah, I mean, but look, I mean, just like I said, take a look at our water contract. We have Arlington for our water. We Some of us is still Fort Worth,
Yeah, you're Fort
and
Worth. I'm Arlington, but yeah.
yeah, you're Arlington. I'm Fort Worth, and that's got to change,
Yeah, it does.
man. So the west side of Canada, for those of you that don't know, the west side of our Kennedale, and specifically Old Town, that's still Fort Worth and Kennedale water, whereas the east side is Arlington. So it is something that we have to look forward. And so, like I said, regional relationships, we do them already. And it is critical going forward, because in order to move Canada forward, we have to work with our regional partners with not now three major cities already established, one that is emerging. We don't have the power to sit here and stay silent anymore. We have to step up in a big
Griff,
way.
go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute the mic there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just case in point here, it's all about relationships. And I see relationships beyond our city boundaries as essential, essential to our success, because we're not going to achieve what's necessary and what we need on our own. And it takes those strategic partnerships and linking arms with our neighbors to be able to get where we're trying to go. Yes, Kennedale is part of a larger regional ecosystem. And to the points made, our boundaries are becoming less and less, um, you know, concrete. And that's important to understand, especially with what's coming. So, and I'll talk about this point again later, but if people are seeing some of the things that are passing at the state level, like SB 840, that's going to have a massive impact on us. And if we're not
Yes.
paying attention to that and doing our research and understanding, not so SB 840 doesn't necessarily impact Kennedale directly in that the size of our town does not fall into that requirement, so to speak. However, our neighboring communities, it does. And that's going to have a big impact on us on vehicular traffic, foot traffic, community growth, those kind of things. And so it's very important to pay attention to those things, but then also so that you're armed and equipped with the information you need to go ask the hard questions or to go seek out strategic partnerships and how to be part of the conversation. And that's our responsibility. When people go to the polls to elect their local representatives, it's more than just showing up in the community at the community events, which we all love and is one of my favorite things to do. But it goes beyond that. Oh, sorry, damn light. Wait one sec.
That's a first for a coffee chat.
Yeah, I hate that light. Sorry.
Do you have poltergeist?
Well,
I
you had
mean,
to put a
Yeah.
quarter in for the light.
So just getting back to the point here, that the overall point is those strategic partnerships are important and imperative. Some examples of that I have participating in the conversations, being in the room, representing Kennedale's interests, would be participating in roundtable conversations at the Council of Governments, participating in things like the offerings of TML, networking at those events, meeting other community leaders. And then being part of the business community, that's something else that we'll talk about later. But participating with the Business Beyond the Battlefield conference and bringing in regional and national business leaders, and having some of those conversations with them, how we can bring business into Kennedale. And then securing a seat at Leadership North Texas 2027. That's going to be a great opportunity for Kennedale to, again, be at the table, be in the room, and network with community and regional leaders. So relationships are how we're going to get where we go. And we see that even on the micro scale too, like ILAs that we have to sign for different services or coverages, whether it's first responders or other other types of things. And so if we're not doing our part in building those strategic partnerships and relationships, then we're not really serving the community in the way that we're supposed to. One prime example of that that's relevant specifically to Kennedale and Kennedale Independent School District would be the school bash. Something that people might not know is that the Arlington residents who actually come to our Kennedale School District, they don't get to participate in the resources provided in the Arlington school bashes. So there's an opportunity there to link arms with the representative of that area, Councilman Raul Gonzalez, who most people know. I know, Jeff, you know who he is,
Hmm.
and kind of working together and saying, hey, we could use more resources also for our community. And you have residents in your community who are not getting the resources they need. What can we do to work together to make this equitable for everyone? And that's what it's all about.
I think the hardest lesson I ever had to learn in life, and luckily I learned it early, was it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's just the way the game's played out here in the real world, basically. And so I think it's important that, Kennedale, has a loud voice and, tiny but mighty. And I think it's people like a couple of our forebears, like, for example, Mayor Johnson, who really just, went out there and put Kennedale on the map and put the idea of where Kennedale is and what we have to offer out to our greater community. And that really started with him. And I find that when I go out there to that greater community and they're like, oh, Mayor Johnson, we know him very well. But this is how we get things done. This is how you cut through bureaucratic red tape is how I always say it, is to make that phone call to that person who respects your voice in the matter and things get done a lot faster. And it's really important, especially when our taxes are mostly county, for example. It's the district and the county is where most of our property tax goes to. And so that's our taxes. And we're one of 41 cities. So we do need to have that connection with the county, for example, and say, hey, we want some of that money back for a bridge that we need to build over a railroad track. And this is a safety issue. Please give us, that pullback. And that starts with relationships and having good relationships. And you had mentioned it, Griff, on the state level right now. It is scary. Last session, they did a lot of things that don't people understand what that did. For example, the state changed the threshold for a community to say, hey, we don't want this built next to our community. It used to be 20%, now it's 60%. That's impossible. It was almost impossible to get a 20% before, but that was the process. That was a stopgag to allow a citizen to have a voice in this process. And now the state's coming down and saying, city, you don't have a voice. Nobody, the citizens have a voice, the city doesn't have a voice. This is how we're going to do it, grow, grow, grow. And that's the messages they sent. And even though I've been a pro growth person, I think there should be a process and I think there should be checks and balances. And I think that balance was broken last year. And it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to be on the TML legislative committee to make sure that the city's voices, small or big, are heard on the state level because it's important. And it starts with having those relationships for sure. We'll move on to the next question. This will be James. This is James' questions to you, Griff. Kennedale has seen developments that didn't deliver on the original promises, particularly mixed-use projects that ended up being something else entirely. What specific policy changes would you implement to ensure developers are held accountable to what they propose, and how would you enforce it? Ooh, good question.
Yeah, that was a great question. I'll lead off with obviously this is a concern that has kind of been ongoing for a while. I would like to say though I have seen great strides, especially in the last 3 years, 4 years of kind of making the necessary adjustments in how we execute policy. So I know in the past there may have been some missed oversight and things of that nature, but I mean, we had a lot of hard decisions we had to make in 2023 in regards to this exact question, where, there's a PD, it didn't meet the standard, issue the CO, don't issue the CO, what do you do moving forward? But after having navigated those hard, challenging circumstances and things, setting a baseline standard and then being consistent. So more than just policy change, I think some direction on how we hold ourselves accountable to that policy. Some of the things that we could discuss would be binding development agreements, performance-based incentives and penalties, and phased approvals tied to delivery milestones on the projects. Now, a lot of those things those are very vague comments I've made. A lot of those things already exist. So more or less, it's about looking at them at face value and seeing if they actually have any teeth, so to speak, and then maybe looking a little bit harder at how we're executing those. But as you well know, Jeff, the council is more or less a legislative body. We're not the ones with our hands on the controls. So some of that is about having those conversations with the city manager on the operational side of things and how they're carried out. It could be just a procedural change, less a policy change. It could be a resource change. But ultimately, at the end of the day, no one council member makes any decisions in a vacuum or by themselves. This would be a team-led effort. So starting the conversation, looking into existing policy, maybe making some minor policy adjustments where necessary, but then also taking a good hard look at the process and how it's actually executed and managed, and seeing if there's some wins right there that we can make. Enforcement matters just as much as policy, and that means that no quiet changes, no shifting expectations, and no waivers without transparency. So making sure that we're also communicating those things to the public. And
James?
it's not about,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Griff.
I was just gonna say it's not about being pro growth or anti growth, or pulling the various levers to affect the changes that you want to see, as much as it is about being pro accountability and strategic growth and being responsible growth. So.
Well, thank you. James?
Wow, that was a lot to
A big
digest.
question.
Well, it was a lot to digest because it just simply doesn't happen. I mean, it's actually laughable. Kennedale has seen developments, Hammock Creek, Alta, and a couple of others that didn't match what was originally presented to residents. And that erodes trust. If a project is pitched as mixed use, then it should be exactly what it is when it's built, not something watered down after approvals are granted. I mean, what I would want to do, to be quite honestly, is I would want to implement stronger, more detailed development agreements that lock in expectations up front. No incentives. I'm not giving incentives to anybody. That includes clearly defined uses, timelines, design standards, and infrastructure commitments. No vague language that can be reinterpreted later, period, end of story. Enforcement is where cities often fall short. And we have fallen short there many times. And that's where I would actually draw the hard line. Now, I do support clawback provisions of any incentive plans, including 380 agreements, which we all know I detest.
Mhm.
Those are for mom and pop shops. End of story. Any multi-million-dollar businessman or developer or company or anybody who wants to come into Kennedale or anywhere should that for that matter should not be offered any type of a 3D agreement, period. Milestone-based approvals, so projects can't move forward without meeting those prior commitments. That is what also needs to be there. Financial penalties, hit them where it happens, hit them where it counts. The way to fight capitalism is with capitalism itself. So financial penalties or reclamation options if developers fail to deliver, and if a developer benefits from zoning changes or city support, they should be held exactly to what they proposed, with no exceptions. Period. I do take a hard line, especially here. When I moved here back in 2016, this place was beautiful. It still is. There have been developments that have come in that have, and for lack of a better word, changed the landscape. And those were not done correctly, and we did not get what we had originally signed up for. So, with that being stated, yeah, if it's going to be pitched as mixed use, then we're going to be changing zoning to PD. Then that's exactly what should be built when it's done, not for buildings that, are just apartments and that's all we got because, the developer ran out of money or, that's all the developer wanted or it wasn't clearly defined. Everything needs to be clearly defined and no vague language, no options.
Yeah, I think we all can agree that we want it to be a certain way. We want things to do a certain way, but the issue has always been the free market. Like when these companies come before council, they're not it's not 100% whole. There's a lot of things to go through. In fact, some of these companies spend $1 million just to show us when they don't even have to show us what their vision of what that property they're trying to do with. And the only control that the city really has anymore is a PD because that's the only one that we can make a contract and say you have to do it this way, this way, this way, this way, which is why the city's been doing a lot of PDs lately, although the citizens are a little upset about it. But the PD gives us that control that everybody's asking us to get control over on that. And in fact, the states, even again, last session removed a lot of that control over. Now we can't say, hey, no stucco houses. We used to have a law saying you can't have stucco. But now we can't tell developers what materials they can build in or not build with in zoning. And we can see some of the stuff they're going to do in the next session too. That's going to take even more power away with that mentality. But the PDs are strongest kind of hold. Having zoning laws, Houston doesn't have zoning laws, for example. Having zoning laws gives us a certain level of control as a community. But that from there it stops because free market was what drives the United States. And from there, it's that. And just things happen. For example, you brought up the Hammock Creek one. There's 5 roads there. And when they went to the county and said, we want an ingress, the county said, no way, there's 5 roads there. And that's what stopped the development. And they would have never known that just coming in and saying, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing in the area because it's just the beginning of many steps. But if we have a PD in place for that, for example, it says you must have an ingress from here, and they get it denied, well, then guess what? Sorry, that's what the contract says, and the development gets closed down, even though they spent all this money on the front end. And so that's where that certain level of controls. But I think we all agree we want to tell them what to do without telling them what to do because that's just how our market works. But we, as a community, we do have a say in what it should look like and what we want it to look like, and we do that. But then that stops with free market. It should be the individual property owner and the business to decide how that destiny looks from there on out. Good question, James. We'll go back to you with Chris' question. You first. Cities often face tension between community preferences and the lawful rights of individual property owners. Oh, what a segue, huh? What is your governing philosophy when those interests conflict, and how should council members ensure both fairness and constitutional principles are upheld? Good segue.
It is actually. Um, no special treatment, no selective enforcement. Let's put it that way. You know, my governing philosophy is simple: follow the law, apply it consistently, and be transparent in how decisions are made. It's that simple. I mean, there is property owners have constitutional rights, and they must be respected. End of story on that. I mean, at the same time, the city does have a responsibility to enforce zoning and planning standards and that reflect, what the community's vision in the UDC and future land use maps are. So we do have that, kind of responsibility to enforce that zoning. Now, but when those interests conflict, the role of council is not to pick sides arbitrarily. It's to ensure decisions are legally sound, consistent with adopting ordinances and then applying them fairly to everyone essentially. So no special treatment, no selective enforcement. The best way to avoid that conflict is to have those clear, well written policies and then apply them consistently from the start. You can't say we're going to give John this over here, but we're going to give Johnny this over here. If it's basically the same thing, we have to consistently apply things from the start. We just can't, whether they're, a friend of the city or not, or whatever, or, hey, me for, how many years I voted for you. Can you do this? No, no, we can't do that. You know, you have a constitutional right. You can definitely go ahead and, explore those. However, like I said, the city does have a responsibility to enforce the zoning and planning standards that, and we have to go by what the UDC and what future land maps and, and what those have already outlined. So that's how you would balance that community preference and property rights and that sort of type of thing. And again, the best way to avoid conflicts, well written policies and apply them consistently.
It's definitely very delicate. Griff?
Yeah, it's a fine balance, unfortunately.
Yeah. Especially in a small town. I mean, especially in a small,
Especially in a small town. If we were the size of Arlington, things might be a little different.
you don't
But
notice the development as you would in a 6 by 6 square mile area.
exactly. I mean, just take for instance. I'm just going to go and use this for instance. We've talked about this sidewalks in Old Town. My
Yes, you and I
property
have.
goes right up to the road. You're not putting a sidewalk there because why? That's my property. The city does not own any kind of 25-foot easement in Old Town, period, because that's how it was built. Now, in the newer neighborhoods, yes, they do have that. However, here they don't. So, if the city would like to take some of my land for a sidewalk, for instance, I feel the city should have to pay a little bit. But again, that's for a different time and different discussion. But in my opinion, again, we have to have those clear written policies. And right now, especially in the Old Town area where there are no sidewalks in certain areas, we would have to have a clear written discussion, and we would have to, the community would have to be engaged over here. And currently, I don't think anyone in Old Town knows very much about that because it wasn't clearly there was no transparency behind it.
Transparency starts with the beginning, and that's what's going
Yes.
on is the beginning. But Griff, go ahead, answer your question.
Yeah, when it comes to this question, I love this question because I'm reflecting on this and a historical reference, both from my personal experience on council, things I've seen and heard. I think my voting record would speak for itself in terms of how I've handled those types of things when they come to council, in terms of zoning changes, things of that nature. At the core of the issue is balance. It's got to be grounded in principle, not pressure. You know, constitutional property rights. That's our neighbors. It's also investors, developers, things of that nature. We put a lot of work into our governing policy, right? So our comprehensive plan, which we just had updated, one of many things that needed to be updated, and it was citizen-led. And that's important to understand because the comprehensive plan, the zoning, UDC, all of those things are our checkdowns on whether or not something you remove that arbitrarily making decisions in terms of who should have the right to use their property for what. There's a baseline for it already. So it's about us being, again, the council being accountable to what the policy says and respecting individual property rights. Again, my record speaks for itself. Some council have voted against use of property arbitrarily because they didn't like that product or they didn't like that presentation or they didn't want that type of development. And that's not how that works. That is an active infringement on property owners' rights.
Good material, y'all both give me. I knew beforehand.
I can't fix that. It's on its own.
It's fine.
Sorry.
You're good, brother.
So yeah, respecting those rights is paramount. And we do that by following the policy and reviewing things. Our P&Z board is there to do that. They make their recommendation, and everything is checked against those things, and the future use and all of those things. So, the other thing with that is, and I'll segue into our responsibility as council. So it is important to also pursue the wants of our community. You know, we have a vision or a plan for the future of Kennedale. If we want to have an influence on that, then the appropriate mechanism for that is not to arbitrarily decide who gets to use their property and how. It's to go out and build relationships with those investors and developers and community builders and bring them into the community and take our community's wants, the types of products they do want to see, and go and try to find those people who can bring those to us, not to sit in our position on council and leverage our authority and abuse our authority to arbitrarily decide what will and will not happen. And that's kind of the core of my philosophy is do your job as council, go seek those things out. And then to ask your co-counsel, hey, what things are we signaling to the market? The decisions that we make historically will signal to the market what we're willing to do or what we're willing to work with. When we consistently just decide arbitrarily how people can use our property, the signal you send is Kennedale doesn't want to do business. Kennedale is hard to do business with. They're going to abuse your rights. They're not going to respect the rule of law. And also when we're doing that, we're opening ourselves up to a lawsuit, which we've seen in recent past. So again, I think my record stands for itself on how I voted. There's a handful of council that have arbitrarily decided things, and their voting record speaks to that.
Yeah, I think this is we'll just take the Joplin apartment complex as example. Is a great example of accountability. Oh, go ahead, James. You want to counter real fast?
I want to rebut that actually, if I can.
Sure, go ahead.
So when I was on council, yeah, I said no to a lot of projects, and it wasn't done arbitrarily because I didn't like the product. It was due to safety reasons. It was done for moral reasons. It was done to protect our community, and it was done to protect the residents and those
Don't forget
communities
the animals, James. Didn't
and
forget
the
the animals.
animals.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Hey, I
I've
got
known
two
you
out.
for a long time.
Yes, and it was also to protect animals. So when he says that we can't arbitrarily do it in some council members' voting records, well, I'm sorry to say this, but you're actually talking about me in that respect because I have denied many projects, and I'm glad to sit here and say that yes, I have done that, whether it was someone's property who wanted to sell it or not. If the community comes out, if the citizens come out as a whole, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you think you have. I don't care if it's God's. I don't care if you are God. If the community is looking at you saying, no, we don't want this, then it shouldn't be forced upon them, regardless of the situation, regardless of laws. So, as a city council member, you do have the authority and you do have the right to sit there and say no. And you actually don't have to offer up a reason for saying no. The reason why I have said no on so many different projects is because it wasn't right for the community. The community said no. The community, the people, the residents said no. We don't want this. So, yeah, it might send a signal to developers and business people alike outside of Kennedale that, hey, Kennedale is closed for business. So they're not going to allow it in. It's not me who doesn't want it, it's the citizens. It's their right, it is their community. I live here too. Do I want, a massive towering 3 foot, 3-story apartment complex going next to my house? No, I don't. I don't want someone looking down from their balcony in the back of my pool. Do you? How would you like it if your wife and your children were out there? I wouldn't. And I'm not even married. I have no kids. I would hate that. So no, there are some times in which you have to look in council and say no, and your record does prove it. You are right. You approved any development that came through your area, and to me, that's wrong. You don't listen to residents. The residents are king. They put you in that seat. You listen to them, not the other way around. You don't listen to the people who have the money. You listen to the people who put you in the seat. And I'll stop my rant there.
Griff, want to rebuttal?
Absolutely. A few things. I'll start with the age-old saying, if the shoe fits. I specifically said in recent past, some council. I think just in this last cycle, neither of us were on council, but I will say that that absolutely happened in this last cycle of council. So that's one prime example. I can think of many others. But if we're going to go there, I'm not going to disagree that you are the elected voice and representation, but I'm also going to caution this idea that, again, arbitrarily deciding things outside the rule of law. You are an elected representative. You have a duty to follow the rule of law, and that's the basis of this question is specifically about constitutional property rights. Uh, the presentation you just heard or response you just heard absolutely commentated to this idea that we forego constitutional rights when the voice of some community members is loud. And again, I just my response to this is that we do have a history of communicating that to the greater region around us in North Texas, that that's how we do things in Kennedale. There's the rule of law, but if there's a small group of people who are loud enough, we'll just go ahead and arbitrarily decide based on a whim. I think that gets real scary when you start considering what the mob rule looks like. And there's a reason why it is our responsibility, and it's hard. It's hard to be a council member, and it's hard to do the hard thing, ask the hard questions, and stand firm on that rule of law, and look at your constituents and say, "Hey, I understand that you don't necessarily like this decision, but at the same time, put yourself in that property owner's shoes. And then how would you feel when your rights are being infringed upon because a small group of people don't like it?" And unfortunately, that's kind of what we hear and what we see. I stand firm. I know that it might not always be the popular thing, but the one thing the citizens can count on me for is consistency and accountability in that specific example.
Great. So we're going to go build a 3 foot apartment complex right next to your house. How's that?
Well,
Would you
let's
like
so
that?
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that because that's what I was going to comment on was the
Steeplechase.
three-story steeplechase, yeah, which is Joplin Road. In the end, it's everybody who's stepping up in the last, let's say, 10 years as far as city leadership. It's our fault of what happened because we created such an environment, hostile environment, to where our government, our city officials quit. So when George quit and all his senior staff, we lost 70% of our staff because of the political climate that I was fanning just as much as some of you were. Brian, you weren't even there at the time, but
Jeff,
James, you were just hitting the seam. So it was
correction.
our responsibilities. Let me finish.
Correction, Jeff.
Let
I
me
do.
finish.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Correction. Um, George Campbell didn't quit. He was fired.
Yes.
Thank
You're right. We fired the greatest city manager in the state of Texas, in the history of state of Texas. We did that. We did that. Okay. That
you.
was the
Yes, we.
reputation we put out there, as Griff's trying to tell you. But my point of the matter was we created such a situation where it reduced our staff by 70%. And the ball got dropped during this process. This is exactly when they were supposed to build a two-story with trees to block, access from people to scene. And then they sold it to a different company who said, we're doing three stories. And then that's what happened. And then we had hired a third party company to do the inspections because we didn't have staff at the time. They dropped the ball too. But again, for us, I think it's an accountability thing. We created the situation where we took out our kneecaps and this happened. On the post side, I think we're holding ourselves accountable and we're fixing it. We're making it right for the property owners. And that's accountability, I think, in the end. I think that's a good example. You both had great points about what you're saying. And there is two loud voices out there that I think recently, we quash consistently in the last 20 years. Every time we've done a community assessment, the no growth has not been, that's not what's on there. People do want the growth. They do want shopping. They do want better parks. They do want better roads. And all this comes with growth. And that's what's been very clear for almost 20 years of community assessments. And even the most recent one, it's the overwhelming majority people want the growth. It was like 70%. And so I think that question is finally over. I think, James, what you're trying to say is we're going to grow. What can that look like? But I know Griff is saying the same thing too. We're going to grow. What does that look like? And that's why we have a council of five voices to make sure that all those voices heard. But in the end, as Griff put it, it's a small group being very loud, hitting a loud drum, and that's exactly what it is because there is a silent majority that stops me in the street and says, I do like this, or I think it's a great idea. They just don't say it on Facebook. These people are afraid because that's the community that we have all created in the last 10 years. Is just that hotbed. And that's my 2 cents. I think you guys all had great points, though. We'll move on to the next question because I know you guys have your day to get to as well. Let's see. This one is back to Griff. This is James' question. Residents are concerned about rising tax burdens. Beyond general statements about economic growth, what are 2 specific actions you would take in your first year to reduce property taxes without cutting essential services?
Yeah, I'll start this off with, that is a real concern. And one thing that we've seen consistently across the board with candidates, and to a point you just recently made, is we have a big revolving door. Consistency is king. We've had, I think, 11 council people in the last 4 cycles or something like that. It's
Mhm.
asinine to say the least. The reason I bring that up is because consistency starts with clear strategy, right? And this question gets tossed around a lot every cycle, every season. And everyone says the key phrase is, oh, we need business growth. No rooftops, just business. So some combination of the two. Um, but the reality of it is those things are not isolated from one another. They go hand in hand. Um, you've heard that there's a hard line, no incentives. Uh, you know, I think that there needs to be a fundamental understanding of the tools and the levers and the things that are available to the council to be able to stimulate the right kind of growth to effectively impact our tax rate. Um, and so with that, we talk about 380 agreements, we talk about PDs and things of that nature. Those are the tools that we have to negotiate and to bring in and incentivize the right kind of growth, while also stimulating the business growth and business development. Again, those things go hand in hand. So you have to feed your business community. They need shoppers, they need buyers. So you have to have rooftops. With that, property taxes are a result of a system, right? You've got council decisions with tax rates, managing the budget, things of that nature, prioritizing needs over wants, making sure that those things are in balance and in check, that you're implementing them at the right time. And then there's the staff execution, there's state law, and then there's market forces, and all those things work together. So two key areas that we can focus on right off the bat is public tax education. I know in my time on council and even to now, and as a young entrepreneur, having to learn a great deal about taxes, it's hard to understand. It's a lot, even for me. And I have resources and access to things that help me close that knowledge gap, and even still is challenging. So I would like to see us take some strides towards some public tax education, ways that we can help people understand what influence they have, and what we're doing to also help, right? So it's a complicated system, even for those of us who are involved in it. Tax education could help people understand what the city actually controls, and what considerations we have when implementing those controls, right? How appraisals impact their tax bills. A lot of times people and politically speaking, you're going to hear this happens every season, especially when it comes to budget and the tax rate. Leaders are cherry picking data points to sell the win or loss and point it at their opponents and things like that. The bottom line is we effectively only impact the tax rate. The whole burden that they're feeling is only one part rate. It's also valuations which come from county. A lot of people don't understand those things. I didn't understand those things. I have a better understanding now, but tax education will help close that gap, and help our taxpayers prepare, and be proactive and be able to forecast what their burdens are going to look like so they can stay ahead of it. Another thing is strategic cost management. I've posted about this several times. It's something that I'm learning in business, and in my EMBA program, but strategic cost management. So we're operating off of a strategic plan, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Our strategic plan hasn't been meaningfully updated since 2015. And before that, the last time was 2009. Right. So my 10 years in the Corps, I've primarily focused in strategic operations, developing policy and plans for strategic operations over decades, over time. And here in our very own city, I look at our strategic plan, it hasn't been touched in 15 years. Before that, 2009. So we have this strategic plan or roadmap that's supposed to help us stay ahead of our costs and understand what costs we're going to see, forecasting those things, but it hasn't been touched in 11 years. I would offer that that's a great place to start, strategic cost management, revitalizing our strategic plan, looking at a bona fide capital improvement plan, which we don't have. We have the components of one, but they're in isolated pieces. We need a plan, a capital improvement plan that is succinct and strategic and is in line with our vision for Kennedale. And then once that's established, now we can start being proactive and looking at our forecasted costs, how to manage our budget to meet those targets. And that'll help us maintain our tax rate, or in a lot of cases, actually effectively continue lowering it as we have. But we need to refresh our strategic plan and clearly define what our needs are versus our wants. Needs sustain the city, wants increase costs. One of those you can do without, the other you cannot. And then from there, just responsibly exploring a tax rate reduction policy. I'd like to work with co-counsel on looking at, once these things have been adjusted, how do we use that to create an internal policy that we all can commit ourselves to in order to at least maintain or decrease that rate over time.
James?
Funny thing, he should mention a capital improvement program. Um, because when I was on council at the very end of my tenure in 2023, January 2023, actually, and the strategic playbook is what we called it. We were actually going to start that. And we actually had the plans to start that. We had the building blocks to start that, which is why he says they're in pieces. That's because they are. We started that. And then, 2023 happened. I ran for re-election. Jeff, you ran against me. I lost. We lost 3 council people that time, I do believe. And to his credit, yeah, there's been 11 of us over the last 4 years,
Way too
5
many.
years.
Yep.
Yeah, way too many.
Well,
So
and it's not that you lost. His point was people quit or whatever, and
yeah,
that's
I
where
mean,
the 11
we've
came.
had tremendous turnover on council.
Yeah, for sure.
So when he says, the building blocks are there, yeah, they are there. We put them there. We started that. However, it wasn't finished. Um, Jan actually started that, Mayor Joplin.
Hmm.
So she wanted a capital improvement plan for specifically water, which we'll get into later. Um, and for other things, and the strategic plan, we were going to actually start that as well, because he's right, it hasn't been touched in 15 years, and we were going to be doing that. But again, 2023 happened, things fell apart, and the council went into a completely different direction, as is the council's will. So the first thing that I do, to be quite honest with you, is initiate a full operational budget review focused on identifying inefficiency and eliminating non-essential spending. So what that looks like is, again, to Griff's point, a capital improvement program, because we need one, honestly. We also need to look in the INS and to see if there's any savings there that we can bring on our tax rate. We had the opportunity to do that in 2022. We should still be able to have the opportunity to do that now. We'd have to look at it. But before asking residents to pay more, the city has a responsibility to ensure that it is operating as efficiently as possible without cutting services. So that doesn't mean cutting police, fire, or essential services or anything like that. It means tightening everything else and prioritizing what truly matters. And that is, that's key. Another thing that I would do is focus on strategic economic growth. And again, here we go. That expands the tax base without over relying on incentives. I'm opposed to 380 agreements. We already know that. The shift risk, and basically it shifts the risks onto taxpayers without guaranteed returns. So instead, I support targeted development, I guess you would say, that would generate long-term sales tax revenue and sustainable business activity. So yeah, you have the rooftops. In order to get the businesses, you need the rooftops, and it's a combo of the two. But in this case, if it's done correctly, then the approach reduces the burden on homeowners by bringing in new revenue streams rather than simply redistributing costs among the residents. But we do need a capital improvement program. We've needed one for some time.
Oh, I'll have to look up that capital improvement one because I was pretty sure we caught up on everything in the last 3 years. But if it's not, then my comment to that would be that the plan from 15 years ago is just finally kind of coming into fruition. And yes, we do need a plan. And I know within council and within the city's the city manager's office, the conversation is have a 5-year plan, have a 10-year plan, and update those accordingly. And we should do that. And we have done that with most everything else for sure. And a lot of that's coming to fruition, and it's been a big battle to get us here. But just even last month's council, when we looked at projections on how, for the first time in my memory of being a servant of this community, our sales tax revenue went up like 4%, which is huge. If you know numbers, 4% increase is huge. A lot of that also, James, to your point, is from 380 agreements. Certain businesses have come and that's benefited. Even on the EDC side, their coffers have, jumped up and will jump up with two hotels coming to where the EDC can be a more effective thing in our community. Their plans right now is to have a strategic plan and how we can target certain businesses and bring them here. So for me, the wheels, we always had the wheels, they just weren't turning or they weren't oiled enough. And now we're finally just kind of pushing through. I think my only comment I'll pick on you a little bit, James, on this is that, we did that time where we took the red pen and we went through and marked everything down. And our government is very open on the finances. We report to the state, just like everybody else does. We have a third party company do it as well, and then we have a serious one every 3 years. I guess I just want to maybe have you clarify why should we continue to do that? At what point can we just say, okay, we fixed that. Can we just move forward and grow? If you wouldn't mind a rebuttal question.
No, I don't. So in my opinion, they're I'll be honest, I haven't even looked at the budget for this cycle. So I don't know if there's anything in there right now. And that's, bluntly honest. Have I looked at it? No. Do I know what is approximately in there? Yes, I do. So when I say kind of, to your point is take the red pen and go line by line, we still need to do that.
Sure,
I
checks and
have
balances. Yeah.
Yeah, checks and balances. I have a copy of the last, but not this one, but the one past, the 2024 2025 one. I have a copy of that one,
Mhm.
and I actually, before I sat down here, probably about 3 months ago, when I, sat down and I was like, should I run or not? I actually did go through that, and there was some heavy discretional spending in there that we could have outlined and we could have gotten rid of. I don't know exactly know where that copy is now, but I wish I had it with me because it would be very, very beneficial. But yeah, sometimes we do need to sit down with the red pen. At what point do we stop doing that? Is when we stop. Is when our taxes start to go down.
Mhm.
Is when
We went
we start.
down last season. The taxes haven't gone up in 5, 6 years, and in fact, they went down last year.
Yeah, James, if I can, and Jeff, if I can just interject right there.
Sure,
Just
same question to you.
one thing I've been saying for the last few years, all right, is that it's and this happens in politics in general, all right. Sensationalism and invigorating the voter to get to the polls, and even studies will show you this, that is why things get so the narrative becomes so negative and attacking is because it's like reality TV. It's what sells. It's what gets people mobilized. And they found that the negative aspect of things is what really drives them less than the positivity. But I want to put a pin in that real quick because as far as our taxes goes, and this is something that our leaders need to do a better job communicating and celebrating, and our community members also too, so that they can understand what's really going on. We have an all-time low in our tax rate for over 20 years,
It's
an
true.
all-time low. We are showing consistent progress in that department. That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, people's tax burden isn't continuing to rise. That's naturally going to happen. The objective then is how can we hold the line and continue to decrease that rate and chip away to create some balance and pressure relief, right? But the truth of it is that in the last 20 years, we're at an all-time low. And on top of that, if you review the budget and you go through it historically, year over year over year, like I have, and study it, you'll see that there has been a great deal of what you guys are saying, the redlining things out, being intentional on what we're going to invest in, what we're not going to invest in. Those conversations are happening, and I think we've been doing a very good job of that. And really, we should be proud that we were able from 2023 to now. We put so many projects in the pipeline in 2023 that we were able to pass funding for and bonds for, while still setting up the future council to decrease the rate and continue repairing and upgrading our infrastructure. Those are huge wins, but they get missed
Big
all the
wins.
time. Those are huge
So,
wins. I think 20 plus projects that we were able to get
23
funding for in
projects.
2023 while setting up the 24-25 councils to sustain the tax rate and lower it an extra cent. And on top of that, based on everything I'm seeing in the budgets that I've been reviewing, I've been studying and reviewing, um, the budgets, it's healthy. We're a lot of hard work's happening, and we should be really proud of it. We should be proud of the work that the council's doing. We should be proud of the work that the city manager is able to accomplish. Being able to do both things is very, very, very difficult. And if you're paying attention to the region, you'll notice we dropped from number 3, highest tax rate in all of Tarrant County, 40 plus cities, to number 8. What does that tell you? It's not just that we dropped it a cent that dropped us down to place 8. It's because the surrounding communities have struggled and had to increase their rate. So while everyone else around us is having a hard time investing in their infrastructure and keeping their rate, holding the line or decreasing it for their citizens, they've actually had to increase it where we've been able to not only hold the line, but decrease it. And that speaks volumes to the work that we did in 23 and the continued work that's being done in reviewing the budget and having a balanced approach at approving projects. And with that, needs and wants. Again, I'll stand firm on the way I voted. There's, one that may be unpopular opinion, but I was one of very few members on council in 23 who was against the park bond. I'll admit that I voted against it. I voted for it contingent upon being intentional with creating a maintenance program. And having some of that funding go towards that. But my point there is that I've clearly stated we have to laser focus on our needs to get our spending under control such that we can create the space and make the space available for us to start handling some of these wants and funding some of these wants. Now we approved it, and guess what? It all worked out. But that's my 2 cents on that topic and that specific question in terms of strategic cost management and our tax rate, where it's really at. And the reality of it is we're in a really good place.
and let me go ahead and just
Go
get
ahead.
this out.
Yep.
To Jeff's point, you don't ever stop scrutinizing the budget ever. That's
I
basic
agree.
steward. But there is a point to where constant redlining stops being responsible and starts being counterproductive.
That's
I
what I would say.
understand that. In practical terms, when fire, EMS, and police capabilities are at risk, and road and water sewer maintenance is delayed, and points, it creates higher costs later. At that stage, you're no longer just being fiscally responsible. Quite honestly, you're just shifting the cost to the future at usually a higher rate because costs are rising thanks to inflation. But you know that for Kennedale, the goal shouldn't be to operate in a constant state of oh god. The goal should be to balance, and that's why you redline is to balance disciplined spending, yes, but also strategic investment and smart growth. So
Thank you.
As
And that's what I once said, basically, is at one point, we for a while that we kept looking backwards when we should be going forwards.
Right.
That was part of the fight the last, 8 years or so was
it
to try
is.
to shove all of us forward and stop looking behind. And so I don't want to go backwards, I guess, with future leadership. I want to make sure that we're moving forward. But you're right, James. We need to be vigilant. We always need to be vigilant. And I think hiring the right people in the city. Having a good city manager like Mr. Hall has been a great asset to this community. He stepped up to the plate and fixed a lot of our own
You're welcome.
identity issues just by his leadership. And
You're
so and,
welcome.
and you could disagree all you want, but you could see it out there as Griff pointed out earlier in projects, in new
No,
business.
I love Daryl.
Yeah, I know everybody loves Daryl. He's a hometown boy without being a hometown boy. But I
That's why
just
I
think,
said you're
and
welcome.
my point is that by hiring him, he hires great people that advise him, and that's what that emptiness we talked about earlier that after we lost George, the void, Daryl fixed that void, and he's put key people in place that are at the top of the state. We've had some of the very best people in the
Yeah,
state of Texas work for us, from city
and that
secretary to our finances. So.
and that's a testament to who Daryl has been,
Yeah.
even when the police department. So
Yep. All right. We won't beat a dead horse, but I'm thank you for
I've got to eat
explaining
breakfast. Hold on.
that. Go ahead. Eat your breakfast. I know it's early.
Wait,
Okay. Last one. This is to you, James. Elections coming. Oh no, not last one. I'm sorry. This is last of your questions. Number 6. Elections come and go, but neighbors remain neighbors. How will you ensure that your campaign and your leadership strengthens relationships within our community rather than deepens division, so that when this election ends, Kennedale moves forward together as one community? Again, good segue from what we just talked about.
it
That's for you,
is.
James.
You're good. I was chewing. Um, Having candy for breakfast is always a wonderful thing. Um, anyways, the answer to that question is quite simple. Campaigns can get decisive. Let's not even pretend to, you know, skirt the bucket here. Leadership shouldn't be though. So I've made a deliberate effort to focus on issues, facts, and solutions rather than personal attacks. Jeff, you and I were in what, 2 elections?
Yep.
I'll throw a jab. I'm not gonna lie, but I never hit a knockout. I never threw a body punch.
Hmm.
Never. Griff, this is our first time going around. I'll throw a jab, but I'm not going to throw you a body punch or a knockout because it's wrong. Now, things have been hurled my way, of course. So I think it's fair to say that, yes, campaigns can get divisive. Yes, they can get ugly as they did last year.
Hmm.
Ugly, actually. But in Jeff, in our 2 go arounds, I think I've been, you know, I think I've been okay. I never
Just fine,
I never
James.
attacked I never attacked your family,
You're,
which
you're you're good. It's always been a great election.
I've seen happen to you before.
Hmm.
People have attacked your family, and your wife and your children. They're wonderful. Every time I see your wife, I give her a hug. I was like, oh my god,
Thank
come
you.
here. But no, it's just like that approach, that type of approach, in not, in keeping to the facts and the issues and solutions, and rather than personal attacks. That approach, it builds trust and keeps the conversation productive. Disagreements, it is part of a healthy community. I'm not going to lie. Yes, it is. There can be disagreement. There is no problem with that. However, it doesn't have to turn into infighting. It doesn't have to turn to division. It doesn't have to turn into Facebook witch hunts. It doesn't have to turn into anything like that. Now, yes, I've been a part of that before. Um, I, when Griff was very first on council, I took everything to the AG and I let them decide. They came back, said everything was circumstantial. I said, great, okay. I went on Facebook, ate crow, said I was wrong, apologized like a man should, and dropped it. I left it there. Now, as a council member, I'd continue that approach by actively listening to our residents, because even though yes, they are the ones who put us there, they are the ones who vote us in. It is them who you are held accountable to. So being accessible, my phone line is open literally 16 hours a day. Call me, text me, email me. I don't Facebook me. That's open 24 hours. Um, treating every concern with respect, even when there's disagreements. You can disagree with, I mean, I disagree with Sarah Cotton on a lot of things, a lot. However, I always treat her with respect because that's how you treat people with respect. At the end of the day, we all live here. We all live in Kennedale. It's Kennedale first. And the goal is to move forward together, not create lasting divides over temporary elections or temporary issues. So that's how I would move us forward. That's how I would treat this. Yes, I've eaten crow before. Yes, I've thrown a jab or two, but I've never full out attacked somebody, and I will never do that.
I agree. You've never done that to me. Griff?
Yeah, I think this question, kind of goes beyond your term or time in office. That shouldn't be the defining moment of a man's character. I think that that shines through and through every day, every conversation, um, every decision, um, no matter who it impacts or what it impacts. I think if you're finding your moral compass by the time you land in office, then you're probably in real trouble there. Um, Now that being said, I encourage and welcome constructive criticism. I think is a way for us to grow together and build strong relationships, strong, meaningful relationships. I think of it just like a family. At home, if you're not willing to have hard conversations with your spouse or your children, then you're missing an opportunity to grow. To grow in love and faith and community. So I encourage those things, but I think that we can disagree and we can have hard conversations by asking hard questions without personalizing the questions themselves being presented and or the way that we respond. Um, I'm glad that James kind of brought that history up. I mean, I went through that much longer than just one inquiry. It got investigated and reinvestigated and reinvestigated and reinvestigated and drug out for a
It's
long
been
time,
fun.
and didn't actually come out completely with the full truth until the 2025 cycle, when harder questions were being asked and more truths needed to prevail. So, but the reason I say that is more or less just a self-reflection. It's I'm not here to judge other people's behaviors or choices or anything like that. Um, I have a responsibility for myself, for the choices I make, the way I conduct myself. Every engagement I've ever had has been with the utmost respect, regardless of who's personalizing attacks against me or asking me hard questions. I reach out to every single individual who has any kind of concern or opinion of me, and I make myself available to them, whether they like me or not, whether they agree with me or not, because that's my role as a servant leader. Um, and that's also where my heart is. My heart is for people. And you had asked earlier why we chose to put in our candidacy, and for me, it's because of my love of serving people. It's what I miss most about my service in the Corps, and it's what I love most about being part of Kennedale. Um, so for me, it's more about encouraging others around me to also follow my leadership in that way. When I have people who support me, who reach out or engage in some of the discourse that tends to get personal, my stance on that, even to people who support me, is, hey, we can do better. Hey, we shouldn't do that. And that might upset some people. I've had people get upset with me, and say, "Hey, you shouldn't tell me how to speak, so or you shouldn't tell me what I shouldn't do." My ask is only, "Hey, let's put our best foot forward as neighbors, and remember that when this is all said and done, uh, we still live next door to each other. We still play at the same parks. We still eat at the same restaurants. We still go to the same community events, and we should feel good about that. And when we show up and we see each other, we should feel good and enriched in those relationships that we have. And that's the foot forward that I'm always leading with. And that's what I ask my constituents to do. And it's how I engage with those who disagree with me. And that's what I hope that my campaign is a platform for that. And that's the message that we send.
I think you both, and even me, but you both have taken a lot of crap for doing what you think is correct and right. All because you step up to the plate, both of you, and to be leadership around here. So everybody else around us can do their lives the way they want to do it, and they don't have to worry about some of this stuff. But I think it's kind of funny that you're both right here on my shoulders too, because both of you, we've forged this past over the years of holding me accountable. For example, Griff, you and I started our friendship holding each other accountable because our compass is exactly the same. James, ours is of adversity, but in that you will call me and have an hour discussion with me on and remind me of what the other side of the coin is, so I can make better decisions for myself. And I forged these paths with you, and of course, and like you had said, Griff, we go out in the community. I saw your lovely wife and family at an event just a couple weeks ago because you were in your class. And James, I see your sister all the time out there hustling and doing her business. So, this is a small community. We do see each other. I even, just spoke to Megan at the chili cook-off for a while, just catching up with her and what she's been doing with her business and her life. We see each other. We have kids that go to school with each other. This is I saw a citizen here in Dallas on Sunday at the Lucy Darling show. They pulled me aside and Jeff Nevarez, I'm in Dallas, guys. Like, and I love whenever he reaches out to me like that. But a small community that's out there. I mean, we've even people say Kennedale in Oklahoma to us. It's we're getting out there. But as far as the local community, we do see each other all the time. And I think it's important that we could be controversial. We can speak out to what we think is right and what we think is just and what we think we need to do. But then when it's all said and done, go down and have a cup of coffee the next day and catch up or see each other and help each other out because, James, your computer's broke. I'll help you out. No problem. That kind of thing. And I think that's really important in a small town. This is why we don't live in Fort Worth. This is why we don't live in Arlington. This is why we live in Kennedale. All right, last question, guys. You ready? I know you
Sure.
guys have a lot. All right, last one. This is my question to y'all, and I'll thank Daryl for helping me out a little bit with this. In the recent community assessment, one of the biggest concerns was the water rate. Well, I think it was the second biggest concern. What does that mean, and how would you approach it? So the question was kind of vague. It was like, what was your concern? The water rate. What do you think the citizens mean by when they answer the water rate? And how would you approach fixing that, whatever view you think it is? We'll do, I guess, Griff, that's you.
Okay, yeah, I think this is a very valid concern, especially given the historical reference of our rate and the recent increase that people experience with that. But I think understanding the history is key. Water rates aren't just about the water itself, it's about maintaining the infrastructure. And that means the system, the whole system, the pipes, the stores, distribution, operational costs, all of those things, right? So historically, cities can go years without increasing the rate, and we did that for a while. But what you'll see on the back end of that is that the need doesn't go away, and it actually increases, and neither does the cost of operating the system, including inflation and other things, the cost of services to repair it, and the cost of materials, and those types of things. And just as a personal example, understanding again, strategic cost management. I'll use a business example in my own business. I launched my business in 2020. It is now 2026. What I've seen in terms of costs, landfill disposal costs alone have gone up 55% since I started.
Hmm.
Just landfill costs. Insurance costs, 51%. So those are just two costs just for, context. When you look at our water infrastructure, it's no different. Um, when there's things going on politically, economically, globally, those things have impacts. The whole point of being strategic and making micro incremental adjustments to your rates is to keep up with those things so that the residents and citizens don't get hit with an unexpected macro change in their home budget. They have to be able to prepare for these things and to live with that forecasted approach of like understanding what costs they're looking at year over year to maintain their household and their residency, right? So you have to understand that. Kennedale's infrastructure planning, it's shown that our systems require ongoing investments to remain sustainability. And one of the things that we talked about in 2023 that I harped on and that I'm continuing to harp on and that I'm going to bring to the table is putting intentional focus on maintenance. When you let your maintenance go to the wayside, things break or degrade at a much more rapid rate, and that increases your costs more expeditiously rather than having a controlled approach where you're extending the lifeline of your resources. So you're not having to take out these massive bonds to rebuild or reinvest in something that should have lasted another 10 or 20 years. And we saw that with our water systems and our water towers and things like that that we've since addressed in 2023, approved the bonds to get these things built. So a historical reference is important and understanding strategic cost management. Um, you know, being consistent in those things and strategic planning, but then also understanding where we were and where we're at. And again, this is something that I'm having to do research on and to get a better understanding. This idea that we've got a little bit of our own capacity, but we're also have some relationships and contracts with Fort Worth, and we also have some with Arlington. And so that's not ideal because that's also creating a more costly system, right? So this idea of expeditiously pursuing some efficiencies in those regards, maybe consolidating to one contract across the board and getting our own, getting back on track with our own reliability and things like that. But the goal isn't just lower rates as much as it is stable, predictable, and responsible management over time. That's what's going to lead to a managed rate, just like with the taxes.
James, water? The age-old argument in Kennedale, the water rates.
Yeah. Well, water is the most abundant resource we have on Earth, or is it? 97% of it is actually salt water, 2% is locked in polarized caps, and only 1% of it's fresh and actually can be used for human consumption. So when you ask about water, oh God, they are rising. And it's because of a combination of, as Griff pointed to, infrastructure costs, regional supply agreements, the long-term expense of maintaining and upgrading systems. In simple terms, it costs more to deliver water today than it did in the past.
Absolutely.
And those costs are being passed on to residents, unfortunately. So what we can do is, throw our hands up in the air and do this. What we can do, it's a hard question to answer. And I'm going to be honest.
Well, and it's
First,
very open-ended. That's why. What does it mean to you? Because I hear a
first,
different voice when I read that question.
I think residents deserve a clear explanation of what's driving the rate increases. No vague answers, just be upfront with them. The city needs to, maybe actively look for efficiencies in operations, contracts. Capital planning. There we go. To control costs whenever possible, we also need to take a long-term, I think we need to take a long-term approach to infrastructure investment. Delaying maintenance and upgrades only leads to sharper increases later on, because as we've seen with the tower that we had to replace, that costed quite a bit of money. Now, regional contracts. Griff pointed to it earlier, and I'm getting off base here, but regional coordination is actually key to this. Working with regional partners to secure reliable, cost-effective water solutions. It can help reduce long-term pressure on rates. George Campbell He got us into Arlington with those connections,
Great rates, by the way, with Arlington.
which they have amazing rates. But to our point earlier, we were talking about, neighboring cities, Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, Burleson, and we were talking about economic. You can fight capitalism with capitalism. Why don't we look at other rates? You haven't, just say you're living in a house. Your house is water. Okay, go with me on this one, please. In your house, you have the option to choose which electricity provider you choose. You have TXU, you have Green Mountain Energy, you have Direct Energy, you have all these different electricity companies. You have one water company, but do you? You have four neighboring cities. You have Fort Worth, you have Arlington, you have Mansfield, and now Burleson. Where are they getting their water from? Arlington has its own, Fort Worth has its own, Mansfield has its own. Burleson, I do believe, contracts with Fort Worth. I'm not sure on that,
Yeah, they do.
but yeah, Burleson contracts with Fort Worth. So why don't we play a little round robin game with Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield? Why don't we look at who might be the cheapest price? Because if you're looking at electricity companies, Direct Energy might have a cheaper plan than Green Mountain. Green Mountain might have a cheaper plan than TXU, or TXU might have a cheaper plan than whoever. So you always go with a lower rate so that you're paying less. So Arlington, they don't need money. They want money. There's a big difference. Arlington gets money from, stadiums, taxes, hotel tax. They have more than $1 billion in their budgets. More than $1 billion. So why don't we take some of that away from them? Why don't we start looking elsewhere for a lower rate so that our customers, our residents, we can see a much lower rate? It is an option. Is it a long-term solution? No. Again, only 1% of water on Earth is fresh water and suitable for humans. So water will, and back in 2022, when I went to TML, the TML conference down in San Antonio, they said water's getting more scarce, and it is. You know, we're not seeing as much rain as we did in the past. Reservoirs aren't filling up enough. So, yeah, rates are going to continue to go up. Is it a fact? Yes. Can we do something about it? Fractionally. We can look at other producers. We can look at other contracts. We can look at other, we can try to go back to Arlington and say, hey, our residents are feeling the pinch. Can we lower it down a little bit? Can we look at other cities that might be able to help us with that rate, get it down a little bit? Yes, we can, but it's not gonna do anything long term. That's the short term relief. Long term relief, that's that's gonna be, like I said, maintaining and upgrading the system. Um, and again, it does cost more to deliver water today than it did in the past. So yes, residents do feel that pinch. You know what? I paid I think it was $120 water bill. I'm one person. I live here by myself. There's nobody else here. How can one person use $120 worth of water?
Mhm.
It's uncanny, but it's the truth. So I don't think that there's anything we can do about the water rate. I wish there was. We can do a capital improvement program. We can look at other cities, but those are short term. We need something long term. And until there is something out there, I hate to say this, and this is where the hard truth comes in, and this is where transparency comes in. We're stuck where we're at. I mean, Arlington has done a bunch of upgrades for us, but we can always look other places.
Yeah, I think this is obviously a very complicated, probably more complicated than even a government budget guidelines
Yeah.
kind of thing, or taxes, as we brought up earlier, because there's a lot of layers to it. When I read that question, is what do people mean? Like, for example, you just said $120 water bill, but your water part was probably only $30. So, are we talking about when we talk about water, we're talking about the whole bill, so all government services, your garbage. your
Yeah.
sewer, your wastewater, all these kind of things that are not budgeted in the water fund, for example, which is a separate fund from the city. Your taxes don't pay the water. Your water bill pays the water.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to break down. And of course, there's the whole water cycle and how we get water. You brought it up, just rain. No, it's also snowcap. If we don't have, good snowcap in the Rockies, the rivers won't bring down fresh water to the lower levels. And then everybody in between us, which is the end, and the Rockies, for example, which is the beginning of water cycle, want their water too. And we're getting their wastewater, which we have to fix later too. So it's one of those complicated things. The state of Texas is addressing, they're spending a ton of money this time to bring more reservoirs up north of Weatherford, for example. There's one going up there just to retain water to give it out in high services. And to your point, James, about what's go out to the market basically. Well, there's really not a market. The state regulates who can even drill nowadays for a well. If you're in a water district that you can attach to their water system, they'll deny your drill. I recently heard of somebody who got approved. That was one of rare instant, I would say, that I've heard in the last 20 years of this issue. And so the state's trying to control their water, TCQ. They're very loud, very strong government agency in Texas.
Oh yeah, they
And
are.
so they only allow like Fort Worth and Arlington recently to be a water seller. Yeah, Mansfield has water, but they're not able to sell water, and we're not connected to their system either.
Well, even if they were, Jeff, you still have to look at, I mean, it's as far as an idea, like, okay, yeah, but when you start peeling back the layers on it, you realize that Arlington's is cheaper by at least $10 per
Oh, it's
10,000
way
gallons.
cheaper than Fort
So
Oh
Worth.
which
yeah.
which goes back to the point I was making is that right now we're parceled between Fort Worth and Arlington. Well, Fort Worth rates are higher. So one of the things we can do is expeditiously pursue being done with that portion of our contract and
Mhm.
consolidate. So there is some things we can do, and we should take a serious consideration at. The idea also of switching water, it's not just a switch. You can't just flick a switch and divert the water. There's large infrastructure needs that would have to happen in order to re-divert or divert the water from one place to another, bring it from Mansfield to Kennedale. Those are long-term increased costs.
Mhm.
And here
We're
on the
not, we're
And they're
west
not,
not
side,
we're not, we're
interested.
not stuck
By
with
the way,
no
Mansfield's
option.
not interested in selling water. They have a growing population. They need the
Right. We're not stuck, but there's small things we can do. But again, pursuing some efficiencies in the contracts to get fully on the best rate possible will help decrease or mitigate the increase that we would be looking at over time.
and here on the west side, over in Old Town area, on the west side of Kennedale, we're still on the Fort Worth water and Kennedale water. The
Yep, you're on a
infrastructure
mix.
in
Mhm.
Arlington has not been built in over here,
No.
so we can't just cut off Fort Worth water immediately right now. We we because then we would be just stuck with well water, and there's really not that much. So we would need the infrastructure from Arlington to be built into Old Town, into the west side of Kennedale, because we're not on it. Basin B is not on Arlington water. We're
Not
still
yet.
on.
Not yet. You will be. As we phase out Fort Worth, as the contract ends, which it was a
Right.
25, 30. I keep hearing different things about how long this contract
I think it was
is.
2030.
My understanding from 20 years ago, it should be up right now. It should be soon. What the city's telling me now is no, we got a while to go. So I'm making them look at that because I've been told different ages. But once we get
We
rid of
were
Fort Worth
told
water,
we were told 2030, and that was because because
that's what I thought,
Arlington wasn't
2030.
building in the infrastructure fast enough. We had to extend the contract to 2030 with Fort Worth.
Which, by the way, is hard to do when you go through long periods of time and not increasing your rate to meet the
Yeah.
costs to be able to invest in that infrastructure to get to that long-term goal.
And that's
And
what
and
happened
Jeff, to your
recently.
other point that you made about, again, I just want to caveat on that same idea, tax education platform to help people really understand valuations and the totality of everything that impacts their burden. Same thing with the bill they get for water, because as you pointed out, there are multiple things packed into that,
Yeah.
including the waste, which back to, denying that or voting against what would have been a 9% increase and keeping it at just a 4 or 5. Those are the things that we can do.
Waste is the biggest issue. And infrastructure, we did $40 million projects now where half the town, Basin B, as you put it, James, is getting new infrastructure and a lot of bottlenecks. So 16-inch pipes going to 8-inch pipes, which is going to 14-inch pipes, all that's going to be fixed. That'll be able to handle the extra load of future growth that's projected for the area, but it also will hopefully help with costs because We had this city of Arlington, because we've always used them for waste, test that meter of the storm drain water, to see if it was backflowing on us, and they were double charging us because that was the original argument in 2015 was, oh my God, my water rates went. No, no, it wasn't the water itself. It was the sewer rates. It jumped up
It was the
20
sewer
bucks.
rates. Hmm.
It was crazy, and everybody was upset for a good reason. And I think that's again what we go back to the question. What does that look like to you? What do you mean water bill? Are you talking about the whole bill? Because that's a lot of things in there that break down. Or are we just talking about the water rate itself, which we have a great rate with Arlington. And as we get rid of Fort Worth and incorporate Arlington into our water system more and mix it with some of our system, because we're going to keep one of our wells. And I think we should always keep at least one so we can always roll it back if we really need to. If becomes serious, at least we have a water source. But the state's so hard on us on keeping it up. And if we said screw y'all, screw Arlington, screw Fort Worth, we're going back to our wells, it'll be even more expensive for us to do the water system. So ideally, the Arlington contract was the best contract. George Campbell is the one that did do that, as to your
Yes.
point, James. And they're not, even their rates to fixing our infrastructure is actually a little bit more than us going public. So lately, we've been getting different people to fix our infrastructure. And I'm not talking about like a repair. I'm talking about we're replacing whole, sewer pipes kind of thing. We're going out to bids, we're getting cheaper, and although Arlington was supposed to be cheaper for us, but we do have that benefit with them. And I think as we move forward as a city, especially with new leadership coming in, things like that, we'll move forward with the contract and go back for a better deal. One of the biggest complaints from Arlington was you guys promised you would fix your infrastructure and you're not doing it, which we are now, and they're happy with what we're doing. We got two new water towers. We got one coming, one's finished,
Yeah.
half a basin B. I mean, all of basin B being done, that kind of thing. And so again, it's a touchy subject. I understand that is, but I think you guys both hit it on the head. It's a necessary evil. It's separate from our taxes, so everybody don't worry about that. And every dollar is accounted for. It's not a money maker for the city. It makes money to bring water to the city and fix infrastructure moving forward. I think it'll fix itself. The only slim hope we're being told is, yes, we didn't increase as Griff's point is, and that hurt us. So we did 2 years of large increases to catch up from the 3% since 2009. So we did 12%, split up 6% each year for the last 2 years, because we were supposed to do 3% since 2009. We haven't done that. Moving forward, we'll do that. We're fixing that as a city, making sure everybody understands 3%. It will cover the cost of 3% over there that's being dealt with us. And then we also did $40 million worth of repairs. Like we have to fix that. We have to, and it'll save money because we're not leaking over here, or we're not putting rust in our water system because the water tower is just so old.
Hey,
We're
that's
fixing those things.
happened.
Yeah, exactly. And the taste quality of Arlington's is better. Fort Worth water tastes like dirt to me. I can tell when I drink Fort Worth water. There's no question. It just this sediment is my mouth from the Trinity, basically.
I'll give you a glass of water out of my tap right now. It tastes horrible. It
Yeah.
smells too.
Hard water mixed with groundwater, it doesn't mix well. Like mineral water with top water is what it's called. River water with groundwater, it doesn't mix well. And that's the
Yeah.
taste you're getting. Over here on our side, it's definitely cleaner. Some days it's very chlorine, a really strong smell, really hard. Some days it is when Arlington has to fix that part, something in their system. Overall, it's the water quality's improvement. But we're still mixing. I still have minerals. I still can't get my hose off of my back faucet because it's all the minerals that are stuck there from a year's worth of use. So, but I think in 10 years, I think everything will smooth out once we get rid of the Fort Worth, and we have a guideline moving forward as a city. And we have good future leadership going out there for bats for the water sellers. And I think the possibility of Arlington expanding their water selling, because we're the test pilot, we're the test program. It's our water. It's Kennedale water. We're just buying it through Arlington. We're using their billing system, but it's not Arlington water. It's Kennedale water. But they want to use our pipes to sell to maybe Rendon or that part of Mansfield that's going to be growing down there by the racetrack, or maybe even Burleson one day, which would be rental. They'll pay us for using our pipes. So I think there's some hope in the future. But in general, if you look at the statewide, water's an issue, and it's an issue for the state, and we're all trying to address it.
And it doesn't help that the state has actually not allowed us to capture rainwater on our own. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that
they
that
own the
would help
water.
us.
They're very
Yeah,
clear about that.
yeah.
The
They own
state
the
owns the
water.
water. Yep.
They own God's water.
Yep, exactly. They're very strong about that. All right. I appreciate you both of you guys coming out. I'll let you do a conclusion, but first, I wish you guys both the luck. I've known you both of y'all for a while. I respect both of y'all. Again, both of y'all are voices in my ear. Like the angel and devil, I guess you want to say it that way. You're both on my shoulders, and I appreciate the relationship that we forged moving forward. And I look forward to seeing the outcome of the results of the election. So, I will let James go first. Griff, you can have the last say, and we'll sign out. James, conclusion.
Well, people know me. People know Griff. You know, I guess Kennedale is at the point where the decisions we make now are gonna, you know, they're gonna shape the city for years to come. We've seen what happens when accountability slips, when expectations aren't enforced, and when short-term decisions create long-term consequences. That's exactly why leadership matters. We need we need a city government that is transparent, disciplined, and willing to make decisions based on facts, not convenience. That means holding developers to their commitments, managing taxpayer dollars responsibly, and making sure residents are, informed every step of the way. At the same time, we have to be realistic as well. You can't cut your way to long-term stability, and you can't grow without a plan. The focus has to be smart, sustainable development that strengthens our tax base without shifting risks onto residents. And most importantly, this is about people. Kennedale isn't just budgets, ordinances, and projects. It's a community. When the election is over, we're still neighbors. The goal here isn't division or political wins. It's building a city that works better for everyone who calls it home.
Thank you, James. Griff.
Yeah, and Jeff, thanks for doing this year over year. I think this is a great service to the community. I know a lot of people really appreciate the work that Kennedale News does.
Thank you.
And I know James and I both appreciate this opportunity to reach constituents and to kind of talk about some of the things that is important to people that's on their minds when they're going to the polls. And at the end of the day, the election is not really about just one issue. There's a plethora that we didn't even have the time to discuss today. Those will come up as we do more meet and greets and Q&As. We have one this weekend. James and I are co-hosting as part of a demonstration of our responsibility as leaders to lead with our best foot forward and create opportunities for us to work together, regardless of the outcome, right? But it's all about how we lead. James and I are very different. We have different perspectives. We have different capacities and experiences that we bring to the table. And everything we discussed today, accountability, development, taxes, infrastructure, all these things really just come back down to discipline, transparency, and making decisions aligned with a clear long-term strategy. When we focus on needs and communicate clearly and hold ourselves accountable, we create stability. We build trust and we move forward together. These are things that I think I've demonstrated consistently in my time on council in 23, my time as just a community member, and historically as a strategic planner in the Marine Corps and in my own business. I don't believe leadership in a vacuum. I don't believe that any one council member effectively, tips the scale or makes the big difference on any one of these issues. I think there's an important factor of togetherness in this, and that we work together with co-council, other council members, that we work well with the city manager, that we work well with the community residents and regional partners like we've talked about. Serving the entire community while doing it with consistency and integrity. It's not just where we work, it's also where we live, where we raise our families. My commitment is very simple. It's to lead with principle, serve with purpose, and always put the people of Kennedale first.
Well, there you have it, Kennedale. This is a coffee chat for the City Council Place 2. Upcoming May elections are coming, early voting as well. Make sure, I think I'll have this out before Saturday. Make sure you guys go check it out. And they're both mutually doing this, so you guys can do a meet and greet. Where is that again? Remind me, one of y'all?
It's going to be
The
over at
meet
Dover Hall.
Dover Hall,
Overall,
yes. At what time?
I'm gonna shoot for 6 to 8, but I do believe Griff, needed like 6:30 or something like that.
No, I'll make it at 6. We'll be
Okay.
good.
Okay, great.
So,
And so they should be there this Saturday. So if you have some follow-up questions, you reach out to them. You can find them both on Facebook as well if you have personal questions that you want to ask them individually. But for now, guys, this is Jeff Navarez with the Kennedale News and another coffee chat. We'll see you on the next one.